I've been doing a lot of reflecting on my time as a Godzilla fan, and it occurred to me that there is a version of Godzilla for pretty much every point in my life. So, what better way to celebrate 70 years of the big guy than to walk through that time? So, I first learned of the character of Godzilla. I first heard the name when I was about 6 or 7 years old through both of my parents, both my mom and my dad, but it was kind of mostly my dad because he would tell me bedtime stories when I was a kid. But this was in the 1980s because, I'm an old fart here. This was the 1980s when I was a kid. So I didn't have Google to go look at Godzilla and be like, "Oh, so that's what he looks like." I had no idea. My dad kind of described him to me, but it just didn't gel into an image. So it wasn't until I was about 7 that I saw the 1954 movie for the first time. And it was the American edit with Raymond Burr. And that was my first vision of Godzilla. And it was quite scary. And I remember being sad that he had to die at the end of the movie. I mean, I knew that he had to, because that's how those kind of movies have to end, I guess. But, my dad told me, "Don't worry, there's more movies. He'll be okay." Even though he was a skeleton and then gone. But that was my first view of Godzilla when I was 7. A lot of my childhood was the Showa era movies, and the very first in the Heisei era, Godzilla in 1985, or The Return of Godzilla. I'm probably going to use the American titles because that's what I know. But let's see, when I was 9, I moved house. And it was in that second house that I saw Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster for the first time. And that was a movie where he was the good guy. And my mom told me he's a good guy in this movie and he fights this monster that's made of pollution. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so she put it on for me. And I remember the really funky music. I remember Godzilla's very interesting intro music. And I remember being terrified of the scene when when he flew over and everybody's bodies just kind of desiccated down to like bones. That was like horrible, but not enough to make me like have nightmares or stop the movie, but it was just like, oh my God, this monster's serious business. I hope Godzilla gets him. And he did. But it had the really funny scenes where he's flying, and that's just epic. That's just the Showa era stuff that I love, when it's just kind of goofy, but also serious at the same time, because pollution is a problem. And I think that movie relates to the world today. But I remember that being my second Godzilla movie, and I really liked it, and I still like it a lot. I remember seeing Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla as a kid, and that movie upset me. First, where it appears that it's Godzilla, but it was really Mechagodzilla in disguise. But when he breaks Anguirus's jaw, that is just so painful. I mean, I still just cringe when I watch that scene because it's just so, oh, ow, eesh, oh, the poor guy. But I guess Anguirus is okay because, the next movies, he was fine. But actually it was previous movies, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know what order they came out in at the time when I was a kid. So they were just movies to me, and they were a lot of fun. But I remember the really cool music when the Mechagodzilla reveal happened. And I remember the King Caesar song. I love that part. I love King Caesar. He's such a cool guy. But I got so upset. I was legitimately crying when Godzilla was bleeding out of his neck after Mechagodzilla, shot him in the neck and he was gushing blood everywhere. And my mom's like, "Don't worry, he's okay. He'll stop bleeding. He's okay." But he fell on the ground and he stopped moving and I thought he died. I mean, I was a kid. I was a very sensitive kid when it came to Godzilla. So I was like, "No, no, don't die, Godzilla." And then he was fine, and he beat up Mechagodzilla, and it's like, okay, Mechagodzilla shot him in the neck, but Godzilla pulled his head off, so, yeah. But I enjoy Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla very much. That was a fun time. The first Godzilla movie that I remember owning as my own was Godzilla's Revenge. And this is so funny and it's kind of cute, but I remember, because of Ishiro and his little radio, I would take my own little battery operated radio and I would put pipe cleaners and foil on the antenna and try to make a satellite dish. I thought I was making the antenna stronger. And I would turn it all the way to the static stations and walk around my house and my yard sometimes trying to get Monster Island, the frequency of Monster Island. I thought it was a radio station because I wanted to talk to Godzilla. I wanted to be his friend. I mean, he was my imaginary friend as a kid and he kind of still is. But, back then, I just really wanted to talk to him, and I thought I could do it through the radio, but unfortunately, I was never able to reach him because he's not real. But, when you're a kid and you've got a powerful imagination, you kind of think you can make anything happen. That's the magical thinking of being a child. And honestly, it kind of sucks that people lose it, but I don't think I did. But I know that I can't magically make Godzilla real, but as a kid, I thought I could. And I thought I could be his friend, and he would never step on any other cities because I would tell him not to. That was my kid logic. But, I like the idea of Monster Island. I like the idea of Ishiro being Minya's friend, and I really like the anti-bullying and courage message. And the way Ishiro, stood up to his kidnappers, that was great. That movie has a special place in my heart, Godzilla's Revenge. And I still have the VHS tape. And then there came the time that Kevin and Bean was on TV having Godzilla Theater. And that was a blast, because every Saturday they would play Godzilla movies. So I was able to see Godzilla movies that I didn't even know existed. Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, Ghidorah the three-headed monster, Godzilla vs. Gigan. And I remember that one because they talked, and I remember flipping out because they talked. But it was only that brief moment in the ocean. But still, I'm like, Mom, Dad, Godzilla and Anguirus, they're just talking. They just talked. It's like Wile E. Coyote. There was one time where Wile E. Coyote said ouch in one of his cartoons that wasn't a Bugs Bunny cartoon. But anyway, I just remember Kevin and Bean being just so funny. And that's where I saw Terror of Mechagodzilla. And oh my god, that movie freaked me out. Katsura with the cyborg thing inside of her body, that freaked me out a lot. I didn't watch that movie a lot as a kid because that part freaked me out so much, once I understood what it was. And I just thought her story was so sad. But Terror of Mechagodzilla is a freaking good movie. I mean, I didn't know it was a sequel. I just thought it was another Mechagodzilla movie. But, Titanosaurus. I am so sorry, Titanosaurus. But I made fun of his roar as much as Gabara's roar. I mean, that's Gabara. That's from Godzilla's Revenge. And then there's Titanosaurus, I would go around my neighborhood doing that. Drove people up the walls. But Kevin and Bean and Godzilla Theater, God, that was a good time. I recorded a whole bunch of Godzilla movies, on like blank tapes for that, but those tapes don't exist anymore because they got old and they fried and they don't work anymore. But for a long time, I could just put those movies on and whenever I wanted and have a marathon. It was fun. Something else that came on to the Kevin and Bean Godzilla Theater was Son of Godzilla. And that movie has a special place in my childhood heart as well, because I really wanted to be Riko Matsumiya in that movie. I would wrap a towel over myself, kind of like that toga that she wore that was like a towel, but my mom wouldn't let me cut up a towel to look all jagged at the bottom like hers did. She was like, no. But I would do that with a towel because I was small enough to fit into a towel at that time. I'm a little bit larger now, just a little bit. But I remember I would walk around my neighborhood going, ah, ah, because she could call Minya by singing, and I thought, what if I could call Godzilla by singing? I mean, so... But poor Minya, he hatches out of an egg, and he's getting beat up by Kamacuras, and just Godzilla comes charging in to deal with the problem, and he's like, okay, kid, come here, I'm gonna take care of you, I'm your daddy now, and turns around, gives Minya his tail, and poor Minya. But I also remember the red water that was helping the people that were sick. Kind of wish we had something like that, too. I always thought about that scene, and I still do when I'm sick. I think about that, and I'm like, I wish I had that red water. But, gosh, that movie was such a long time. I would climb trees in the neighborhood, thinking I could just spot Godzilla on the horizon. Like, I was a strange child, but, But the end of that movie was just so sad, because I thought they froze to death, but my mom was like, no, and my dad was like, no. They both explained they just hibernated because they're reptiles, so I just accepted that explanation. I mean, 10-year-old kid, what do you expect? But yeah, so that was Son of Godzilla. That one is special to me, too. By the way, if you want to know something really funny, when Minya was born, when he hatched out of his egg, I'm like, okay, where's his mommy? And I came up with this whole scenario that there was a girl Godzilla. She was pink. She had a little bow on her head, because that was my idea of what girls look like as a kid. And she was just Godzilla's wife. And that's funny, because that's like my Twitter display name is Godzilla's wife. But I figured she got sick and died, and that's why she wasn't there. And that when she was pregnant with the egg before she laid it, her and Godzilla spent a lot of time together because they knew she was going to die. And then she laid the egg and then she died. And Godzilla was really, really sad and really, really lonely. And then Minya hatched, and that kind of made him feel better because he wasn't all lonely anymore. But yeah, in my mind, even as a little kid, I kind of gave Godzilla a girlfriend. So and that would become my Shizilla character later on in my life, believe it or not. My first introduction to Mothra in the Godzilla franchise was Mothra vs. Godzilla. And I remember that Showa Godzilla being one of the meanest looking Godzillas, even meaner than the original. But I remember the little fairies who would sing and could call Mothra, and it made me think of Riko, who could call Minya by singing, and I just thought, well, maybe people just have these powers that they can sing and the monsters appear. But what I remember most is that Mothra died, and I was sad about that, because how were the babies going to fight Godzilla? The little larvae. But they tied him up with their silk stuff, and he fell into the ocean. And I thought that was kind of funny, actually. I mean, poor Godzilla, he was just all tied up in this webbing stuff, and he couldn't get out of it, and even his breath didn't seem to really break through it once they made it thick enough. So he just kind of fell into the ocean, and I guess he just kind of drifted around for a while, but I thought Mothra was neat. So my mom went and got the Mothra movie for me to watch, and that's how I learned about Mothra. Because I know Donnie likes to know that stuff, because he loves Mothra, and so do I. That's how I learned to love her. My mom was the Mothra influence, just so you know. My first Heisei era movie was probably the first one a lot of us saw, which was Godzilla 1985. And my dad was the one who rented it for me, and I remember him telling me, okay, in this one, Godzilla is a bad guy again. So that was kind of a little warning, and, my parents sat and watched it with me because they were worried that it would be really intense and scary for me, but for the most part, it really wasn't. It's just, when I was a kid, my parents showed me the movie Inner Space when I was probably too young to see it. And I know that movie's supposed to be a comedy, but it freaked me out. Stuff inside the human body freaks me out. I just don't like it. It grosses me out. And the heartbeat part freaked me out a lot when I was a kid, and I had nightmares about that. So they told me there is a part in this movie where you're going to hear Godzilla's heartbeat. So they wanted me to be aware of that because they knew I might freak out. So when it got to that part where they were shooting the cadmium missiles into his mouth to knock him out, they said they're going to shoot this stuff in his mouth that puts him to sleep. But it sure looked like he died to me, and maybe he did in the movie, I'm not sure. But I just know that when the Russian missile exploded in the sky, the nuke, that it created a storm and the lightning hit Godzilla's dorsal spines and he woke up again and he was fine. So it's like, okay, maybe he was asleep, but maybe technically he was dead. But I remember my mom commenting on the scene where, the guy notices the birds in the background of the photo and how Godzilla followed them, and it was like a conditioned response. That my mom's like, oh yeah, Godzilla's kind of a bird brain, and I just thought that was funny. But they were luring him with that bird call thing, so who knows? But I remember being really, really upset when he fell into the volcano. Like, I was crying. I was upset. I thought that he just burned up in a really horrible way, and I think that's what my parents were the most concerned about, was that would upset me, and they were right, it did. But I also remember, like, during the movie, not really at the volcano part, but during the movie, Raymond Burr has this line that talks about Godzilla, how, we should learn to understand him and maybe even try to communicate with him. And that really stuck with me, and that really affected how I see Godzilla. As a kid, I was probably 12-ish, maybe a little bit younger. I don't remember exactly, but I just know that I was not a teenager when I saw that movie, and that line really affected me, and it stayed with me. But that was my first exposure to the Heisei era. I was just about 17 when I saw Godzilla vs. Biollante for the first time, and I remember that movie really blew me away. The whole genetic engineering stuff, and that movie became the template for my Shizilla character. I'm like, oh, I know how I can make a Godzilla clone character now. And so that movie is why my Shizilla character exists. But I remember Biollante being a very tragic being because she didn't ask to be created. And she just was, and this is what she became, and it almost felt like she got punished for existing the way she did. But she turned into these beautiful spores, and she kind of floated away into the atmosphere. So it's kind of like she didn't really die. She just kind of dissipated. And it's like she could recongeal at any time. But it's just she won't have Erica's spirit in her anymore, because Erica was the daughter of the scientist who put a human girl's cells in with a rose and with Godzilla's DNA, and that's how Biollante happened. And also, this movie introduced my favorite human character, Miki Sugusa, the psychic girl. Oh my gosh, she's in all of the Heisei movies, but I love Miki. We love Miki Sugusa in this house, and I have a lot of fun writing her into fan fiction. I just gotta get to work on more of my fan fiction that has her in it, but my god, Miki is such a wonderful character. She's so malleable. She can fit into pretty much any place in the Godzilla franchise. But Godzilla vs. Biollante is a good movie in my opinion, and I like the music in it too. And it just shows that, when you play God, you don't know who's going to get hurt. Now, the next Heisei era movie that I saw was one that seems to be a bit controversial in the fandom, but I like it. As goofy and wacky as it is, and as messed up as the story is, Heisei era Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, it's really an important movie to me personally, because I feel like that moment with Shindo in the window, gosh, that rhymes, but where Godzilla and Shindo are looking at each other and remembering, I really believe Godzilla cried there, honestly. And I think Godzilla believes Shindo abandoned him to the fate of being mutated into the monster that he became, because he was just a dinosaur who got shot and he was defending his territory and he got punished for it. And I feel like he believes Shindo was responsible for all that pain that followed, because I don't think the mutation process was just a quick, momentary thing. I think it was very painful for him and traumatic. I think Heisei Godzilla is a very traumatized creature. And in my view, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah let us see a glimpse of that. And so that movie's special to me because, it showed me that Godzilla is a very emotional creature. And during my formative teen years, I saw most of these after those formative years, but they were made at that time in my life, so they relate to that time. But I was a very emotional creature, so Heisei Godzilla is like my baby, because I relate very deeply to him and just the very deep emotions that he feels. And this movie is important to me because it showed that to me and allowed me to take off with my imagination with it. So that's why that movie is special to me. And also the M11 Terminator tribute. Gotta love that. And of course, there was Godzilla vs. Mothra, the battle for the Earth, which has the egg being transported and Godzilla getting bit on the tail by a larva, because poor Mothra, she just cannot catch a break. But that movie introduced Batra, which Batra is such a cool character design, and it's kind of a shame that he didn't make it. I'm assuming Batra's a boy, but it's kind of a shame that he didn't survive that movie, because I really liked his purple beam, and I liked the whole wing design. It's so goth. It's like Batra's like the gothic version of Mothra, like the dark version of Mothra. And, Godzilla was kind of a dickhead in this movie, to be honest. And so he kind of got his just desserts, but at the same time, I feel bad for him because, he got woke up by just this meteor hitting the water, I think. And it's like, come on, dude. Don't take it out on Japan. They didn't shoot you. But Mothra departing off into space, that was kind of sad, because it's like, will we ever see her again? And will she come back and find out that Godzilla melted down and that the Godzilla she sees is not the same one? There's just so many things about this movie. And poor Miki, she seems to be pulled in every direction, in my opinion. But she kind of had a very side role. But I really liked the singing in this movie. It was so pretty. And the Mothra twins in this movie are so cute. I love their little outfits. And the fighting in this movie was a lot of fun too. So quite an enjoyable film. My favorite movie in the Heisei era, and probably my favorite Godzilla movie, is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. Because this is the movie where we get baby Godzilla, and the relationship with Azusa is so adorable. My God, she is so sweet in this movie. I love her so much. I love Azusa. And this is the movie where we see Godzilla be soft, like genuinely soft. He's trying not to scare baby, but baby gets scared anyway, and it's almost like it hurts Godzilla's feelings. It's like he's going, don't run away. I'm not a bad guy. I didn't always look like this. I have so many stories to tell you about how this happened. And it's also a very harrowing experience for Godzilla in this movie, because he gets that secondary brain blown up, and there's Fire Rodan, and honestly, if it wasn't for Fire Rodan, I don't think Godzilla would have survived this battle, to be honest. I think Heisei era Mechagodzilla really was his match. That could have been like his main rival in this series, but that's just my opinion. But Heisei Mechagodzilla is not a slouch, I'll tell you. That guy's armed to the gills and beyond. And Heisei era Mechagodzilla was a scary creature, and the fact that he was man-made, just, made out of King Ghidorah's parts, because Mecha King Ghidorah in the other movie. But just the fact that this is a movie where we see how lonely Godzilla is, and the fact that he's sensing another like himself. And then poor Miki, she's starting to see that Godzilla has feelings and that he is deeply emotional. And now she's having doubts about wanting to hurt him. And she's hesitating with shooting him in that secondary brain, but she's kind of forced to. And when she does, and her reaction after just tells all, because she's really upset about it. And so when Godzilla finally does get Mechagodzilla, thanks to Rodan giving him the spiral red beam, and that scene where he was revived is so beautiful. All the glitter and stuff, I like that so much. It's one of my favorite scenes in the Heisei era. And I think that's kind of the moment when Miki realized that she didn't want to kill Godzilla. She didn't want to hurt him. She just wanted him to live in peace. And she's realizing that, everybody is just trying to destroy him, but why? I think she's realizing that humanity is the reason Godzilla keeps coming here, and every time people beat up on him, he just fights back. If you leave him alone, he'd leave people alone. He only rampages in cities when he's got something to be mad about. And it's other monsters or human meddling. But for her to wish Godzilla and Baby well at the end of that movie, that's just so special, because I feel like that was a turning point in her character, and also in Godzilla's character too. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla is a fun movie for me. I do enjoy it. Some people hate it, but I like it. Specifically for two reasons. First of all, you've got little Godzilla, who is an adorable little goober with those big bug eyes, and he's playing in the mines, and it's just so funny just watching him be like, oh my gosh, what is all this stuff? Oh my gosh, yeah, it's scary. And he messes up the mines and he runs away, and everybody's mad at him for that. But this is the movie where Miki states outright that, don't you see? He has feelings just like we do. And she's talking about Godzilla. That he has all the same emotions we do. That he is probably a very complex creature internally, and we just don't see it because we only know the human perspective of Godzilla in these movies. So those little glimpses of the feelings that he has, like when he's shielding little Godzilla from Space Godzilla's, his nasty rays, and he's taken all those hits and he finally falls down, and then Space Godzilla traps little Godzilla, and Godzilla is just so upset. He goes rampaging. He's mad, he's upset, he's sad, he's heartbroken. And he just wants to save his little baby because he doesn't want to be alone. And I mean, little Godzilla is just scared and he's trapped and he doesn't know what's going on. And this big, scary monster is attacking his dad, for God's sake. And Space Godzilla was a pretty formidable foe. You know, he tossed Godzilla around quite a lot. So watching Godzilla beat him was really, really satisfying. And then at the end where we see little Godzilla break free and shoot those little bubbles, that's just so adorable. And I just feel like that was kind of a reflection of Godzilla's own joy at knowing that his little one is free again. So that movie has a happy ending for me, and it just makes me happy to watch it. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I kind of love and hate Godzilla vs. Destroya, but I say hate in like air quotes because it's the movie where Hasty Godzilla dies, and that's just very upsetting for me. So, like, that's why. But as a movie, it's a really good movie. So, like, I just hate that Godzilla dies. And I don't watch this movie very often because I do get extremely upset when I watch it. Like, I have a very intense emotional reaction to it. So, I only ever watch it when I really need to just get some upset feelings out. So I've probably maybe watched it probably 5 times total in my life. But, you know, as a movie, we really see Godzilla go through a hefty amount of grief and trauma. I mean, think about his character and the trauma of mutation, and now he's feeling that pain again, and he's just gone pretty much insane from the pain of his body overheating, and his actions reflect it. And then you've got Destroya, which is, I love the design of Destroya. I mean, what a crazy, cool monster. And I mean crazy in the positive sense. But just what Godzilla goes through in this movie is so horrible. And Godzilla Jr. too. And you've got Miki, who basically leads Jr. to his death, and the guilt she has to feel for that. But the scene where Godzilla Jr., when he dies, and you see Godzilla just trying to revive him, trying to save him, but he just doesn't make it. He's too little and he's hurt too bad. And the way Godzilla straightens and just starts screaming, that just wrenches my heart. I'm emotional just thinking about it. It's so incredibly sad. And then when he actually melts down, that's just very difficult for me to deal with. I don't like to watch that scene. Sometimes I'll stop the movie before it gets there because I just can't stand to go through with it. So I've probably watched the full movie with the full all the way to the meltdown scene maybe 4 times. But I've put the movie on 5, but I've only watched all the way to the meltdown maybe 4 of those times. Sometimes I just like, I can't do it, and I turn it off. And I rewind it, and I put it away. Or I just stop it and close the tab on the browser. But Miki thinking that her work is done, and then, you know, out of Godzilla's ashes comes a fully grown Junior into the next Godzilla. I mean, it's a message that Godzilla can never really die, but at the same time, it's not the same Godzilla who has all that life experience, so he's a whole new creature. And sometimes I wonder if he might be a little bit gentler to humans because the start of his life was humans being gentle to him. And I have my own headcanons about, you know, grown-up Godzilla Jr., you know, in my headcanon that the rapid mutation damaged his ears, so he's deaf. If he could get hearing aids, he'd be able to hear, but because he's so big and because he's not human, you know, he can't really hear anything. So, you know, other monsters can get the drop on him, but once he figures out what's going on, he can just beat the crap out of him, just like his daddy taught him. So, but if you talk to him, he's not going to hear you. He's not going to hear the helicopters going over him. He might hear really low pitch noises, but that's about it. But anyway, little Junior grew up, and now he's going to walk in his daddy's footsteps. But that's the Heisei era. The Heisei era is my teenage years. Like I said, I saw it, most of it pretty much after high school and all that, but, it had like the Power Rangers level of special effects, which, tokusatsu, that's how it is, and I enjoy that kind of style of special effects, but I relate so much to Heisei Godzilla in the sense of his anger and his loneliness and just feeling like he doesn't belong. And it's like he's searching for a place to belong. And he finds that when he meets Baby. And it sent me a message that, you might be a weirdo, but there's going to be other weirdos who are going to like you for all your weirdness. So just be patient, because those weirdos will find you. And of course, in about 2004, I found the Kaiju File forum, and that's where I met Donnie and a whole bunch of other people. And that's where I kind of found my kaiju home. So I don't really go there anymore because forums have kind of fallen out of favor for like social media. But like, I think some of the people that were there are kind of around on Twitter and stuff, and I'll probably run into some of them if I haven't already. But yeah, those movies were made during a very formative time in my life, so I relate them to my teenage years because, Heisei Godzilla is teenage me, very much. Okay, I would be remiss to leave out the 98 Godzilla movie, the one that everybody calls Zilla or Gino for Godzilla in name only. But at the time, there was just so much hype about it, like the little Chihuahua, I think it was Taco Bell or Del Taco, I don't remember which one, but the Chihuahua, and the New Year's Eve ball where the tail knocks it over and messes up Times Square, and just, there was so much hype for that movie, and I remember my parents surprised me with that. They tricked me into thinking we were going to a ball game, and I was upset because I had been telling them over and over, I want to see this movie on opening night, and we were going to a friggin' ball game? Are you serious? So I'm in the back of the car with a can of Pringles, and I have my arms crossed. I'm making it very clear that I'm not happy with this. And then we pull into the movie theater, and I realize where we are, and I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? And we went and saw the movie. And I enjoy that movie. I really do. I think it's a lot of fun. I don't like the idea that Godzilla is just taken out by missiles. And I didn't like that he really didn't have an atomic beam, although the cartoon did show him having like a green ray. I didn't watch a whole bunch of the cartoon. But when I did, I liked it. I had a lot of fun. But I remember it was so sad when he was trying to wake up the babies that had been killed. He was nudging them with his nose, and it was really sad. I just felt bad for him. But, as a monster movie, it's a lot of fun. And, I kind of enjoyed Matthew Broderick. It's like Ferris Bueller's in a Godzilla movie. How fun. But yeah, I have to bring that one up. I have to mention it because that was an important movie in the sense of I'm seeing a Godzilla movie in a theater, but I really wanted to see a Japanese Godzilla movie in a theater. And very soon I would. So we're just about to the end of my teenage years because in 1999, when I was 19, I got to live my dream of seeing a Toho Godzilla film in the theater, and it was Godzilla 2000, which came out in 1999. That movie was so much fun. Both my parents and I went to see it, and there wasn't a lot of people there, so we kind of had the theaters to ourselves. So we were a little bit loud in there, just like, oh my God, get him, Godzilla, just kind of yelling at the screen and tossing popcorn back and forth, and just, and my dad was not being a big jerk. about it, which was a rare treat. But I really liked Orga, and that's just a cool character design. I kind of wish he could have done more in that movie, but when he tried to eat Godzilla, Vor, when he tried to eat Godzilla, that kind of freaked me out when he flipped his head open and that like parachute kind of thing came out. And as soon as Godzilla's head went in, I'm like, okay, get him with the nuke breath. Come on, get him with the nuke breath. Come on, come on, come on. And when he did it, my mom was like, uh-oh. And he just blew Orga apart, and that was just so much fun. But even now, because of one line in this movie, there's kind of an in-joke in this house of, is it going to go through you like crap through a goose? That line was just so funny. I really enjoyed that. And just hearing it in the theater and having Godzilla's roar just bellow at me so loud, that was the dream. And I lived it. That was so much fun. So the next movie in the Millennium era that I saw, I found it by accident. I was channel surfing and I saw a Godzilla suit I didn't recognize. It was about halfway through. It was GMK, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, giant monster, the all-out attack. Okay, so I'm like, oh, I've never seen this Godzilla before with his white eyes and his huge teeth and his huge claws. And I'm like, holy crud monkeys. So, and I didn't get to see how that one ended because we got a phone call at a bad time and my dad did not want to take the phone out to mom. He made me do it. I missed the end of the movie, so I didn't know what happened to Godzilla when his beam came out of his shoulder until years later. Years later. So I sat for years not knowing what the hell happened. All because of a phone call at a bad time. I was pissed. I remember yelling at my dad like, why couldn't you take the phone out there? I was watching that. I mean, did he roar? Did you hear anything? And Dad's like, well, I turned it off. I don't know. And I'm like, well, you just ruined the end of this movie for me. So, but years later, I did see the full movie and I enjoyed it very much. The music in this movie is banger all the way through. I'm not too much a fan of the designs of Ghidorah and Mothra and Baragon in this movie. I just feel like they made them too small. They were kind of puny compared to Godzilla. And I feel like King Ghidorah just kept getting these power-ups. And it's like, come on, just stay down. You're dead, dude. And besides, it was kind of Godzilla's own evil that took him out, since it was its own atomic beam. And just the heart at the bottom of the ocean, that freaked me out a lot. But now it's really cool. It's like, ooh, you see, the beating heart of evil never stops. And that was a very evil Godzilla. I mean, he turns around and nukes an intersection because a lady was screaming. I mean, GMK Godzilla is a hater. He's a dickhead. Okay, but he's one of my favorites because that's the version of Godzilla I put in my Beauty and the Beast fanfic. And Donnie knows all about it, but if you want a version of Godzilla that sings like Josh Groban, go find my Beauty and the Beast fanfic. So the next movie I saw, I did not see these movies in order, just so you know. It was Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. And I remember the splattered bug in the ocean. Oh my god, that was so gross. I still look away for that scene when I know it's coming because, ugh, I'm squeamish. So, but I remember, this movie has some parts that are funny and just silly and like Showa-esque, but overall, I'm not so much a fan of this movie just because of the black hole thing. Like, nothing can stop a black hole. So the idea that Godzilla could blow one up just seemed really ridiculous. Like, the concept is neat, but it's like, how is it not chewing up the planet right now? I mean, the black hole gun just, okay, whatever. But a person riding on Godzilla's back. Okay, I enjoyed that, and she got the tracker on him. But it's like, I want to do that. I want to ride on Godzilla's back. I want to pet him. But the fight with Megaguirus, where he's just like jumping in the air and she like shoves her stinger into his crotch, it's like, oh Lord. The fights in that movie and the rampages were a lot of fun. But this movie is kind of so-so to me. But if it's on, I'll watch it. But like, it's not a first choice. But it's a fun movie. I do enjoy watching it, but like I said, it's not the first one I'd put on for a new fan. But it's still fun. So I saw the 2 Millennium Era Mechagodzilla movies, Godzilla and Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS. And I'm just going to talk about them both kind of as one unit. I actually looked these movies up because of someone's fan fiction with their version of Kiryu that is sentient and speaks. So props to Christine, because your Mechagodzilla fanfics still rock. And her Kiryu with a sexy deep voice and his like biosynthetic dreadlocks, just, I love him. I love her Kiryu. He is so delightfully evil. He's just so nasty, but he's also so sexy. Like, how? But anyway, so I went and got the Kiryu movies because I wanted to see the canonical version of the character. And what a tragic figure. I mean, he is the skeleton and the soul of the original 1954 Godzilla, basically ripped out of the afterlife and forced to fight one of his own. In Christine's story, that's his son, and he has to fight his own son. But I'm not sure what the relation is in these movies. But I just found Kiryu to be such a tragic ghost in the machine, and he just wanted to go home, it feels like. And the fact that he got to at the end, he fulfilled his mission, and he kicked out the human, and he showed some sentience by saying goodbye to Yoshida, sayonara Yoshida, and then he boots him out. But I feel like that's a movie where the 54 Godzilla got to get close to the humans and understand that they had feelings like him, and that he had hurt them. He understood that he hurt people and what the other Godzilla was doing, and he realized he couldn't let that continue. So for me, Kiryu is a very emotional character, and seeing Mothra get mixed up in it, I mean, it's so sad that, as Mothra always does, she had to do the Phoenix thing. She got killed, and her babies carried on. But I feel like she was trying to talk to Kiryu and trying to talk him into stopping Godzilla, and whether or not he listened because of her, that's, up to your discretion. But I feel like she played an important role in what happened, and I really like the idea of them sleeping in the cradle of eternity. It kind of implies that Kiryu is going to hold that version of Godzilla down at the bottom of the ocean until he starves to death, which sounds kind of awful because that might take thousands of years. But, just as a concept, the movie has this feeling of going home, of release and, coming to see someone else's point of view. And I really like that about these movies. So, Kiryu, awesome. Godzilla Final Wars is just a mess, but it's a good mess. It's a whole bunch of monster mayhem. I love the little soccer gig with Anguirus and Godzilla jumping at him like he's a soccer ball and he's a goalie, and it's just like, oh my god, what is this? But the fight with Monster X, that was pretty terrifying, and I enjoyed the choreography of that fight very much. And I do like Final Wars Godzilla's design. I just think his bottom jaw is a little bit too thin. I mean, it's like he's got like a flip-flop, on his face. But, the design grew on me. But, I kind of like the Exilian commander, our leader guy. I mean, hello, he's kind of hot. And just, like, I don't have a whole bunch to say about this movie, but it's pure chaos. And, I was in my mid-20s when I saw it, and, I feel like the human plot feels like it kind of tried to be the Matrix a little bit. Maybe it's just the outfits they wear, but I enjoy this movie, and when I want chaos, I'll put it on. So Godzilla Final Wars, that's a lot of fun, and I think kids would have fun with it. So anyway, most of the Millennium era, that was the span of my 20s. And, that's when I kind of exploded with some fan fiction for the Godzilla franchise. And, ideas from Millennium era movies kind of made their way into Godzilla and Shizilla and those little stories that I did. But, these movies span my 20s. And what came into my 30s was so amazing. So the hype for Godzilla 2014, which was America taking another shot at a Godzilla movie, I got excited about that. And I decided I would take Mom to see that as kind of a late Mother's Day present. So, May 16th, 2014, after all the hype and the Godzilla alert stuff, and just watching Twitter and Tumblr and everybody just rumbling about this, we went to the theater and had a blast seeing this in the theater. I remember at the very beginning of the movie when Godzilla was starting to come out of the water and then they cut away, my mom, she hit me in the arm and she's like, oh, this is going to be good. So we got the noisy nerd theater. I mean, people were clapping, people were cheering. The airport scene when the camera pans up to Godzilla, everybody was clapping and cheering, and everybody shut up immediately when he roared because they wanted to hear the roar. And then they just started clapping and cheering again. And then when the atomic breath happened, when we saw the blue light, somebody said, oh my God, he's going to do it. And, everybody behind me started stomping their feet and like smashing their hands together, clapping really hard and really loud. And, there's somebody was doing that whistle that I cannot do, but you usually hear people do it at a ball game or something when they're cheering in a crowd. And just everybody was like, yeah, do it, do the breath, come on, do it. And it was so loud it almost drowned out the movie. And I was yelling too. I mean, I'm like, Bob, he's going to do it. He's going to do the breath. And then he did it. And everybody was like, yeah. And just, you would think we were at a baseball game or something or a wrestling event. And it was just so much fun. We took the ceiling and the roof and the atmosphere over that theater off. I mean, it was so loud. I could not hear the music, but everybody was watching the screen. But like, there was like people behind me high-fiving, and my mom was like, "Oh, I like that." So, she had a good time, and my God, it just felt like Godzilla was back. Because, from 2004 to 2014, there hadn't been very much. It had just been a very slim time of fans just creating fan work. But Godzilla 2014 brought it back. And it was fun. And that Godzilla is my husband. So right around the time the MonsterVerse was starting, just 2 years later, we saw the start of the Reiwa era with Shin Godzilla. And that movie is fun because it came out in Japan on my birthday. So when I see the July 29th date on the posters that people post online, it's like, oh yeah, that one's mine. That one's my movie because it came out on my birthday, July 29th. So that year I turned 36, but it would be a bit longer before I would actually get to see Shin Godzilla because it had to come out here on DVD. So for my next birthday, I got it as an IOU in 2017 because it wasn't out on DVD yet. But as soon as it did, my mom, she wrapped up a note saying what she would get me. And as soon as it came out, she got it for me. And I watched it with my dad, and I kind of wished I hadn't because all he did was gripe about all the human scenes. He completely missed that it's political satire. But Shin Godzilla, that crispy critter, I mean, that poor creature, I feel so bad for Shin because, he's just wandering around in pain and we just keep harassing him. And, he's wandering into our space, and I know that they had to stop him. But it kind of had the echoes of the original 54 Godzilla in the sense that he was in pain, he was trying to figure out what was happening to him, and he was stumbling into our stuff, and we had to stop him because we couldn't communicate with him, we couldn't reason with him, so we had to stop him. But the atomic breath in that movie is so chilling. The split jaw is so chilling. That is like, oh, that is so creepy. And that's why I love Shin Godzilla. I mean, he might look like he's a slab of beef jerky, but my gosh darn it, he is a wonderful slab of beef jerky. Like, come on, that crispy critter. You kind of want to bite into him, don't you? I do. I mean, would he crunch or would he just go mush? I wonder. Would he just turn to mush? He would turn me into mush, I think. But in my headcanon, Shin Godzilla, by the time he gets to his upright atomic beam, scary back beams, tail beam form, he's blind. And he uses an internal radar to navigate. It's like his white cane. So, he can sense what's going on around him, but he can't really see more than light and dark. So, if he's got a helicopter coming at him, he's not going to see it, but he's going to feel it. And that's how he can aim so well, because it can feel the tiniest things. So, if a fly comes too close, bzz, it's gone, because he's going to sense it. So, you'd have to be really silent, and maybe a stealth vehicle, like a stealth bomber, might be able to get past him. But I don't know. I don't know how his internal radar works or what he feels. But he uses it to navigate. That's my opinion. And it's just a headcanon. Other people treat him like he can see. So I'm not saying you have to treat him as blind, but I do. And in my Cosmic Within fanfic, I imply that he's blind with the word sightless eyes. And it's because the stars are his eyes, and they are accusing everybody. Because I made him into a cosmic horror where he became a universe. And he just continues to become more universes. And in every one, he creates us just to make us suffer because that's what we made him do. So his suffering is our suffering. And it's not a happy ending. But, every time he's frozen, he starts anew. And it's like those Russian dolls that one within another. So yeah, Shin Godzilla, my crispy critter. I love you, baby. I'm sorry that you hurt. I'm not going to say a lot about the anime trilogy because I've only watched it once. And I was a little bit disappointed with how Godzilla was treated. He was just kind of treated like an object, but I love me my giant Godzilla Earth, okay? I love my big round boy. And if you're mean to him, I'm going to have to come and smack you. Because I love my big round beefy boy. But yeah, so anime trilogy, it was interesting and it was fun, but just it didn't hold my attention. So I just watched it to see Godzilla, and then I'm like, okay, we're done there. But if you like it, that's great. Enjoy it. Because I'm sure there's someone out there that likes those movies, and I'm not here to be like, oh my god, if you like this, you're a dork or something. It's like, we're all dorks here, okay? We're all nerds. Let's all just be nerds in our own way, okay? No, talking down on people for what they like, all right? But the anime trilogy, the monster designs are fun, but the movies themselves are kind of, so, that's my opinion. So in 2019, once again for a Mother's Day present, I took my mom out just to get her out of the house. And we went and saw Godzilla King of the Monsters. So that's more monsters here. And I picked the IMAX because I was paying. So I got us an IMAX movie, and it was an experience. I mean, when Godzilla roared in that movie, I felt it in my chest. It was really awesome. I loved King Ghidorah. I loved that this was Mike Dougherty's like love letter to the fans. And I saw the Easter eggs and I recognized them, and Godzilla standing up out of the water, with, straightening up. That was just so old school. And the fights, everything was so much fun. And like the scene that really dropped my jaw the first time I saw it was Rodan when he did the barrel rolls. And he was just slapping the crap out of all the aircraft that were trying to get him. I'm like, oh, dude. And my mom, she was like, whoa. Because, my mom liked Rodan. So she was like, whoa, look at him go. And, the tension with stopping King Ghidorah from waking everybody up and just all the mayhem that was coming. And Godzilla had to come in and just clean up this mess. And Mothra. I wish she had more screen time. But I was crying for Donnie's sake when Mothra was in that movie because I know he loves her so much. And I love her because he loves her. And so, like, his fanish nerdiness became my fanish nerdiness. So I'm like, Mothra! And I did sing the song in the theater. And somebody behind me was like, whoa, this chick knows Godzilla movies. And, like, that was funny. But this theater was not as loud as the 2014 experience, but there were times where people were yelling and cheering and clapping and stuff. Like all the beats that were love letters to the fans, it got loud in there. But when Godzilla did the nuclear pulse, I remember that making everybody cheer. But Burning Godzilla brought back some old drama. So I was crying seeing this movie. I'm like, oh my God, don't die, don't die. And he didn't. And I was fine with it. But my mom, she's like, is he going to eat him? Because, when he pops out of the debris with Ghidorah's neck in his mouth. And then he just nukes him. And my mom's like, oh, burp. And that was the end of that movie. But that was when Godzilla became my husband, y'all. That's when he became my husband. I walked out of that theater and I turned around and I kissed the movie poster. I'm like, we're married now. We're penguin married. Okay, this is my husband. I love him very much. And I was on cloud nine. And when that came out on DVD, I wanted it and I got it. Same with 2014. But King of the Monsters, KOTM, that's still my favorite in the Monsterverse. I love it. And when I want chaos, I put it on. So now moving into the movies that came out into the 2020s, we're moving into the Godzilla of my 40s. So, of course, 2020, we got really bogged down with the COVID stuff. But 2021, Godzilla vs. Kong came out in the theaters, but I didn't go. I pirated it because I had to be very COVID cautious because my dad is high risk. So, due to his advanced Parkinson's disease, he's high risk. If he gets sick, he gets really sick. So, I pirated the movie, but I turned it on really loud and I turned off all the lights in my room so it would be dark. So it was like a theater experience. And my God, did Godzilla and Kong beat the crap out of each other. And I did not expect Mechagodzilla in that movie because I tried to stay away from trailers and spoilers, which I was successful at because I was very surprised by Mechagodzilla showing up. But I want to put a little spotlight on Gia because Kaylee Hoddle, I think it is, or Hoddle. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but she's a deaf actress. So seeing Def Rep in a Godzilla movie makes me really happy for deaf fans because, deaf people, they don't get a lot of good rep. So they deserve this. They really need good rep. And Gia being, a girl of color as well as being deaf, so it's not another deaf white person, blah, blah, no shade to Nal DeMarco. If he wants to come into a Godzilla movie, by all means, bring him in. Please, he's hot. But seeing Def Rep and seeing Kong use ASL, that was just, I literally cried when I saw Kong using ASL. Because it's like, oh my god, he can talk to humans. Like, we have a Titan who can talk to humans. And that was so neat. And I felt bad for Kong in that movie because he was just kind of dragged along and, Godzilla shows up and just starts beating on him. I mean, Godzilla's kind of a dickhead in this movie, but he's a dickhead with a purpose. Because, as soon as I saw him, going after that factory, I'm like, oh, he ain't doing that for no reason. There must be something there that's pissing him off. And Mechagodzilla's eye. So he knew something was wrong. And then poor Kong, he's just dragged into the middle of this mess. And, Godzilla just starts wailing on the poor guy. And, they duke it out. And then they have the whole Hollow Earth thing. And the fight in Hong Kong, that fight was just so brutal. Godzilla got so pissed and Kong got his butt kicked. Poor Kong. I really felt bad for Kong in this movie. But when Mechagodzilla came out and just started beating the crap out of Godzilla, I was floored. I was not expecting that. But, having Kong jump up and take Godzilla's side and just smash the crap out of Mechagodzilla, I kind of feel like they reached a truce. Where Godzilla at the end, he roars, and it's kind of like, okay, you stay in your place, and I'll stay in mine, and you stay out of my space, and I'll leave you alone. That's kind of the message I got. So, Godzilla and Kong, overall, it's a fun movie. I do enjoy it, and I do watch it. I'll put it on. So, it's an enjoyable movie, and I had a lot of fun the first time I see it, and it's still fun with rewatches. So, yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong, good one. You might notice that I don't say much about Godzilla Singular Point, and the reason why is I couldn't get into it. I tried, but I felt like I was always pausing to read all the dialogue, and it got really tedious for me. So I couldn't stick with it, but maybe if they came out with a dub eventually, maybe there is one and I just don't know it yet. But, I'll give it a shot with a dub, but having to stop constantly to read the subtitles and to keep up with it, it got really frustrating for me. So I heard that Godzilla has very little screen time, so, I've seen the YouTube clips of SP Godzilla in action, Godzilla Ultima, and that's not a favorite design for me. I'm sorry. It's Godzilla, it's cool, the atomic breath is cool, and if you like that design, that's great. Look at his butt. He's got some cake back there, man. So, I do like that. I like his legs. It's more of his face. Just looks weird to me. But, hey, if you like Singular Point, more power to you. Enjoy it. Watch it. Love it. Because I'm not here to hate on what you love. I'm not going to yuck your yum, okay? So, maybe someday I'll give it another shot. But right now, meh. It's probably good. I just couldn't deal with the tediousness of having to stop so much. But it's good. I'm sure it's good. So, have fun with it. Monarch Legacy of Monsters is a really fascinating series, and I'm happy to know that they are going to be working on another season because I thought it was really interesting just having the past and the future kind of tell parallel stories, and how the older characters and the younger characters and when they meet, and just how they're all tied into all these things with the monsters. And With Godzilla, the fight in the final episode of season 1 with the Ion Dragon, when he throws it up the portal, I just cracked up. Like, that was just so much fun. I use that as a reaction video when I'm blocking somebody. It's just like, get out of here. But it's like it's a flower that's slowly unfolding, and I just want it to hurry up and unfold faster because I'm just so hungry to see what happens next. And, the Axis Mundi place that's kind of between Earth and Hollow Earth, like, I could totally see where legends like Avalon came from out of that. Like, imagine one under the Glastonbury Tor, where Avalon supposedly exists. Imagine if there was a portal there and like, oh, hi, King Arthur's down there. Like, can you imagine? Like, there's so much you could play with the Monarch Legacy and Monsters universe and like what they're doing in between. It's just, I love it. I like it so much. I just want it to come back. I want more. Now, here's a Godzilla movie that is really dear to my heart just because of the time I saw it. Godzilla -1. Okay. I feel like -1 Godzilla, that specific Godzilla, is a representation of my lifelong trauma with emotional abuse, bullying, stuff like that. And I feel like that was a movie that the world needed. Just because Godzilla feels like a physical manifestation of trauma, and how when you try to run from it and ignore it, it just gets bigger and it's going to keep coming back. And also just Shikishima's story in that movie. I feel like -1 has one of the best human stories in a Godzilla movie, and it's one that I think a lot of people who've gone through trauma relate to. Just with the not being believed, being shamed for it, finding that one person that gets it, and, dealing with the nightmares and the fear and the anxiety. And, I mean, Godzilla's scenes, every single scene Godzilla has in that movie is absolutely horrific. And, like, this movie makes you feel like what it would be like in the middle of a rampage, and it's not so cool anymore, is it? It's terrifying. I was in the theater. I went to the theater to see this. I had to. And I remember leaning back in the seat because it was a reclining seat, and I had my hands on my chest. And there were so many scenes where I forgot to exhale for 2 to 3 minutes total, and I would be gasping for breath. And I was wearing a mask, for COVID precaution, and I just remember gasping for breath so many times through this movie because I was holding my breath so much. But this movie it touches on trauma and abandonment, and the government just being like, well, we're not going to touch this, you figure it out. And just how the private citizens all came together to deal with Godzilla. I mean, oof. I needed this movie when it happened. It's very special to me. So I will not tolerate -1 hate ever. This is one of my favorites. And finally, Godzilla and Kong. Just recently saw that one. And my God, was that movie mayhem. I enjoyed it very much. Easily my favorite fight in the Monsterverse was the zero gravity fight. Godzilla's evolution. I love the pink. If you hate it, I'm sorry, but where is your taste? I'm kidding. If you don't like the design, whatever. I mean, I have designs I don't like, so, I love the pink. Pink's my favorite color. I'm a girl. Yo. But seeing more of Gia, that was a lot of fun. And for her to have such a special role in that movie and to be so important, that meant a lot. Because once again, the deaf fans of Godzilla, they deserve to be seen too. And seeing Kong use more ASL and seeing Mothra, once again, for Donnie, I got emotional over Mothra. Thank you, Donnie, for introducing me to her. I'm kidding. My mom really did, but, through Donnie, I learned to love Mothra. And I love Mothra. I love my big bug. But I also really loved Shimo. I want to pet her and take her home and love her and hug her until there is no more trauma left in her. Because my God, was she abused really bad. Everybody that Scar King touched was abused. I mean, Scar King is one douchebag of a villain. He's a favorite villain, one of them, because he's such a dick. Oh my God, his laugh creeped me out. And there was just so much chaos. This movie was a love letter to the Showa era, and I did spot the little nod to -1 when Godzilla steps out of the Coliseum and the ground like rises up because of his footfall. I love that. And seeing someone's fan art, Seaguns, his fan art, or her, I don't know the gender, but Seaguns, their pizza Godzilla got stepped on by Godzilla. Like, that's the highest compliment you can get to your fan art, is Godzilla stomping it. You lucky, 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 lucky nerd. But this movie is complete mayhem, and just seeing Kong find his place. Oh my gosh, I love that. And Zuko, that little baby, he was kind of a brat, but he's so cute. He's kind of like Baby Groot for the Monsterverse, I think. I am Groot. But Godzilla in Kong is pure chaos. It's the best kind of chaos. I had the time of my life watching it, and I recommend it to anybody who just wants a movie that's just nuts. It's completely nuts in the best way. And, you know, if people want to gripe about it, that's their problem. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But, like, you know, trying to twist it as, oh my God, you suck if you like this. Like, what is your problem? But anyway, yeah, so that's Monsterverse as it stands now, and the Reiwa era as it stands now. So with all that, it just goes to show that Godzilla has really been there, and there has been a version of him available for me for pretty much my entire life. There is really no period of my life that doesn't have a Godzilla in it in some form or another. And he's worth celebrating. You know, he's kind of always been my imaginary friend. My shtick on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X, is that I'm Godzilla's wife, and that I kiss him and love him every day. And I kind of do. I kiss my Monsterverse Godzilla figurine. So, yeah, nerd fact. But, you know, there have been a lot of people who let me down in my life, you know, growing up and in my adulthood, but Godzilla never did. Godzilla's always been there. You know, I can always count on some version of him to be in the back of my mind, and I can just turn to him and be like, my life sucks, help me. And there will be some kind of wisdom that comes out of my imagination through Godzilla. And I think we all need that. You know, there's, as Godzilla 2000 so eloquently put it, there's a little bit of Godzilla in all of us. And maybe that's true. Because he came from the imagination of Ishiro Honda, Tomoyuki Tanaka, and Eiji Tsuburaya. I mean, if those three men hadn't sat down together, we wouldn't have Godzilla. If Haruo Nakajima didn't put on that 220-pound suit in 1954, we might not have had Godzilla. And never forget the history of where Godzilla came from. He's the fear and horror of atomic weapons and their misuse, and the misuse of war and hatred and cruelty and anger. I feel like he's a message of, we could have peace, but we have to stop fighting. We have to sit down and talk. So even now, today, Godzilla continues to be an anti-war symbol, and a symbol of what happens when you misuse atomic weaponry, and when you just hurt people for the sake of hurting them. Don't do that. So happy birthday, Godzilla. 70 years. Keep on going. Skreonk!